The poor state of roads in South Africa is not only a challenge for many motorists, but the farming industry as well. Agri SA says deteriorating roads are costing the agricultural industry billions of rands every year. It also threatens the food security of the country. To tell us more about this, we're joined by Agri SA's chief economist, Kulani Siweya. Kulani, thank you so much for joining us. He's live for us in Johannesburg. I've just squizzed through the main findings you communicated to the media in your press conference yesterday, but it really is quite telling, the numbers that you do present, and this research cannot come at a more important time. Talk to us about some of your main findings. 94% of participating farmers in the survey said they rely on road transportation to move an average of 94% of that produce. That is a huge amount of people trying to move their product from one part of the country to another. What else did you find?
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me. As you rightfully have pointed out, that 90% of the produce in the industry is being moved by roads. And this is mainly because that we do not have a viable alternative in this regard. What we have also found is that this is a national problem, and it's not only isolated into the few provinces. And what we've also found is that the farmers themselves have been forking out from their own pockets about 200,000 per farmer to try to sustain some of the roads that they're using. And I think this is contextualized in the fact that most of the farming activities happens in the rural parts of the country where this maintenance of the roads and the upkeep is not up to standard. And yes, as you rightfully have pointed out as well, we are quite concerned that this does pose a risk to food security in South Africa, given the fact that if we don't have good roads in place, then the produce is not being able to be transported to the markets. We can't feed the nation, but also the farmers themselves cannot sustain jobs in this regard.
Yeah, often when we speak about the state of our roads, there is unfortunately a focus on our metros. You know, people complaining about potholes and flooding and that kind of thing. But our main arterial roads that really cut across rural into our urban areas, that's really the veins along which South Africa's food is transported. In terms of those people that you surveyed, what parts of the country were you able to focus on, and which are your worst affected provinces?
Yeah, so in our findings, in as much as we did allude in the report that we were concentrating on the 5 most affected provinces, this is not just associated to those particular provinces, but it's a national-wide issue with all the provinces. But the provinces that we did note were Mpumalanga, Northwest, the Free State, Western Cape, as well as the Northern Cape in this regard. But again, as we alluded to earlier on, these are not just the only provinces that are experiencing challenges. And as you would have seen in the report that you have circulated, just some of the pictures of how bad of a state that some of the roads are currently in. And again, it just undermines and threatens the viability of the sector and just its sustainability going forward as we look at the situation.
From your understanding of how best to transport produce, one would assume that most of these farmers would, if they could, rather transport their produce via rail where possible, because that would have less impact on the roads. It would be far cheaper. If you look at our fuel pricing, is still spiking. Is that the elephant in the room that we really should be speaking about? Is the deterioration of our rail system and what impact that's had on our agricultural system, our agricultural sector?
Yeah, I think the situation just points out to just the state of the infrastructure in the country. And I think we can chew and walk at the same time. On the one hand, yes, we would like to see most of our goods being transported through rail, as you pointed out, that it's much cheaper. However, given the challenges that we have there through cable theft and just the poor state that the rail system is also encountering in this current situation, we unfortunately have the current crisis where we're then moving through roads, and that this now has become an emergency. And I think one of the challenges that we've also noted and are concerned about is just that the structures that have been put in place are not efficiently or effectively addressing the matters from a national as well as provincial authorities in this regard. We as Agri SA have wrote a number of letters to the Department of Transport where we haven't received any feedback. no response or commitments to at least just come around the table to kind of discuss these matters and see if there's a viable solution and how we can move this needle forward.
Now, Kulani, this is really an industry that has carried the nation through very difficult times, especially over the last few years. But it's also been pointed to as the industry that's really contributing so much to the GDP and has the potential to do even more. How much of a negative impact could this problem with transport have on that potential for this industry?
Yeah, you rightfully point out, I mean, agriculture has always been, especially in the last few years, been the shining light or the shining star when it comes to contribution to the GDP. But you've also maintained that the agricultural sector is a low-hanging fruit in dealing with some of the social ailments that we face currently, especially when you look at the high unemployment numbers that we have. The sector is quite labor-intensive, and we've always said that once you equip the sector will be able to absorb the number of low-skilled and semi-skilled kind of individuals to kind of make a dent on these unemployment numbers. But with the current state where things are not in place, particularly when it comes to infrastructure, which is a key component for the sector, it then undermines as to how best the sector can perform going forward.
Now, I believe, according to your statement, that Agri SA will be sharing this data with the Presidency and the Investment and Infrastructure Office. So you're looking to go right to the top because this is how urgent this matter is. What are you hoping to get from that? And how urgent is this, if you can try and put that into words?
Yeah, look, we fear for the worst. And as I pointed out earlier on, we have tried to reach out to the correct structures that have been put in place that deal with these matters. But we have not received any form of commitment or political will to at least come around the table. We're just basing our thinking around what the President had mentioned in the State of the Nation address a couple of months ago, where he mentioned that infrastructure is the most important aspect that needs to be dealt with currently in order for the economy to recover. And in this statement, he also mentioned that the road network will need to be prioritized in this particular conversation. So we're just then going to the top, hoping that the President himself will take it upon himself to kind of prioritize this conversation and have some meaningful change and some progress with this particular challenge that we're facing as a sector.
Well, this is very, very important and telling research. So thank you so much for speaking to us about it. And let's hope it reaches the right ears so that something can be done sooner rather than later. That's Agri SA's Chief Economist, Kulani Siweya, joining us live from here in Johannesburg. We thank him for his time this evening.